I'm Hannes. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Speechly. Speechly is a technology company, and we develop technology for spoken language understanding and particularly voice UIs. Alec did a good job of introducing me there already. So my background is in academia. Been working on started my career as a researcher, and after getting my PhD, went to the industry. Been working with all sorts of data-related projects, from big data to machine learning. And for the last 7 years, I've been working mainly in speech and voice. And the last big project that I did before founding Speechly was for Apple, where I was one of the natural language engineers working in the Siri project. And so, Speechly, the headquarters is in Finland. I'm also now joining this session from Finland, and we also have an office in the US, in Chicago, where Mandy comes from. And this is a picture of Helsinki Center during the winter time. I'm not actually sure, was it even Mandy who took this very, very nice picture? Today in my presentation, I'm going to walk you through the evolution of user interfaces, especially focusing on voice. I'm going to take a look at where we are today and share some of my perspective on technology and the challenges that we are especially facing in voice technology today. And I'm also going to look a little bit in the future, but as you saw there in the title, I'm going to look at the near future of voice. I think that the far future is something that I guess pretty much everybody is pretty familiar with from science fiction and all of that. But I think the near future and the state of voice interfaces today, and what we can do with voice today to add value is something that's very interesting. So without further ado, let's start. So as I said, just want to give a brief sort of historical context to voice user interfaces, and if you think about interaction with computers in general, it really follows the trend of first the interaction mechanisms of interacting with computers was something that was very tightly aligned to how computers worked under the hood. And as we go forward in time, sort of the more high level and more natural ways to interact with computers for humans, the more natural ways for humans to interact with computers started to emerge, with typing, pointing, and touching. And so this is sort of the natural evolution. If you think about it from the standpoint of efficiency, the more natural the interaction is for human, the more efficiently you can harness the computer to really do the tasks that you want it to do. And so we've sort of gone the path from this very machine-centric way of interacting to something that's more human-centric, and basically things that utilize the main senses of humans: visual, touch, and sound. And so if you go to today, touch and now voice are the sort of the end of the state of the art of the spectrum of this sort of human-centric UI evolution. And what's interesting is that if you think about like touch and physical gestures in general, as an interactive sort of form, they are a bit more primitive. So you can think of tasks like moving objects or placing something from one place to another. That's sort of physical things that are sort of more primitive, and things that also like less distinguishes us as humans from say animals. But then if you think about voice and language, and in that context, language and talking is much more higher order, sort of represents higher order functions, and more abstract contexts, and the type of knowledge work that you can think of being more of high value to the society today. So I think the promise of voice is really to tap into this like higher order functions, and to do that a lot more efficiently with computers. And I think that is the value of voice, sort of that humans have tried to tap into for now many decades already. And so the interesting thing is today there's been like the situation with voice is very interesting, because there for the past, I would say, or the past decade, there has been this quantum leap in voice technology. So nowadays the technology is at a place where speech recognition and some of the NLU tasks that we can do are pretty much on human parity. So there are these old voice benchmarks that nowadays the state of the art transcription accuracy for these state of the art algorithms is like almost superhuman. And we have this big trend in voice technology, also in business, with smart speakers and voice assistants making really big waves in the market. And so we are in a very interesting place right now with voice. But then on sort of another point, and if we are like really honest to ourselves, even though the technology is pretty much there in terms of being almost human parity quality in terms of transcription and NLU accuracy, the voice and the use cases are still pretty much in the niche. So there are a few very popular use cases like kitchen timer, playing music, asking for weather, but that's pretty much it. And so the different use cases for voice haven't really exploded. And so if you compare voice to something like touchscreen, voice is still really much in its infancy. And if you think about the reason for this, it's the reason for this is still pretty obvious, and it's just plainly that in most experiences beyond these basic use cases, the user experience is not really there. So there is still a lot of room for progress. So that it's sort of a paradox a little bit, why even though the technology is there, there are still some fundamental issues with voice, and some of these issues are things that I want to go through in this presentation. And so, like, taking this this idea of quality, like what's really quality, and so one definition is really like quality is the value delivered meeting user expectations, and so the problem really with voice is that the expectations that have been built towards voice is really high. We've seen these science fiction movies and there has been for the past years a lot of hype around voice and its possibilities. So the expectations are extremely high. But then if you look at the real practical behavior of many of these applications, the value is not what people expect, and that's really, I would say, a big problem nowadays with voice. And so where does this gap really come from? So think about user experience and AI in general. And this is a problem not only with voice, but a problem with AI-based experiences in general, is that the different extremes of user experience are easily amplified. So if you think about like a classical UI, it can be bad, it can be pretty good, but even if it's bad, we probably are able to complete the task somehow, or nothing catastrophic at least happens. But with AI experiences, if everything goes well, the happy paths are phenomenal. They're magical even. But then if something goes wrong, they can be catastrophic. So you can think about a self-driving car. If it takes you home, that's magical. But if something goes wrong, it's a chance that it can drive you off the cliff. The same thing is with voice, that, you know, ordering a pizza with voice that for your friends, that's magical. But then if the system accidentally calls your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, that's catastrophic. So this is something that that is an issue with voice experience, like AI experiences in general, but voice is very much a part of this category. And so if you think about the where we are with voice, so I said that we're at around human parity. And so if you think about humans, how good humans are in verbal communication or understanding language in general, actually humans are not that great. So if you think about average human word error rate in a transcription task, it's around 5%. And if you think about two sentences with 10 words each, basically you're going to have at least one word error in every sentence, every other sentence. So that's actually not that great. But what humans really separates from computers in terms of these errors is the resilience, and humans are actually pretty good at recovering from misinterpretation. So that's something that clearly lacks from modern voice UIs, and I think that's one of the most important things that for the near future, I think the voice UIs can and will be able to correct. And so if you think about how you increase the quality of a voice experience, it's actually not that complex thing, or the answer is actually pretty simple. So basically, to get a better user experience, you need to lower the expectations and deliver higher value. So the difference between these expectations and value delivered actually becomes smaller, and the perceived quality becomes higher. And I think this is something that is still lacking from the voice experiences that we are used to nowadays. But in the near future, I hope and believe that this is something that can be fixed. And I will now, for the few next slides, give some ideas how we can achieve this. So really, how to solve the quality. So the first step is managing those expectations. And And one of these tools that I think is very critical is actually adding a screen to these experiences. And so what you can do really with screen are a few things that are actually quite simple, but do give a very big improvement to the overall experience. So first of all, what I am a big proponent of is that if you can associate the experiences not to a person but to a machine, that's something that already can give sort of manage the expectations, in the sense that you do not enter this uncanny valley that easily you might sort of end up if you try to mimic in your experience a human being. And so the point is that humans are very good at sort of detecting these small things that deviate from what they expect to a person behaving. And that is something that I call this uncanny valley. And if you try to mimic a person, you might end into this this phenomenon. And so if you do not try to imitate a person, but really make it clear that the UI is a computer with the exact same behavior, you can actually come up with or have the experience really change from on interacting with an abnormal behaving person to something that's more of a highly functioning machine. So I would say that's something where the voice user experiences that we've used to could benefit a lot from. The other thing is really constraining and displaying like what the application can do. So most applications in the world are actually quite narrow, and they're designed to do just a few things, but to do those things very well. And I believe voice UI should do that as well. And so using visual elements on the screen to limit the domain is something that makes the application a lot easier to understand. And there are existing UI conventions to do that. So why not use them? So here, for instance, it's on the right, it's very clear what you can do. On the left, it's totally open. And so I think that's a simple trick that you can do to really manage the expectations. Also, the value, like identifying the value is something. So you, in experiences, there might be certain things that make or somehow really deteriorate the experience, and identifying those and using voice technology to do that, you can improve the experience quite a lot. So you can think of like online gaming and things like moderation, which can improve the overall experience a lot. And so that's an example of that. And finally, I think this voice really as a feature is something that is a lot more riper already today to utilize voice, as opposed to really making the voice an operating system. And having, if you want to start with voice enabling, for instance, a simple search box is a great way to start. And I predict that we will have a lot of these type of things in the near future, where voice is utilized, where the context is very clear, and you can really optimize the voice experience for that. And for instance, the iOS 15 now has has voice enabled the browser web address search bar, and I think that's a very good example of these type of voice as a feature as opposed to voice as the operating system. Then about elevating the delivered value. And so there, and this is something that I've been a sort of evangelizing now for long, and this is something that's also related to the technology that we build at Speechly, is that using something called real-time spoken language understanding can really improve or mitigate these type of errors that can be catastrophic in these type of AI and voice experiences. So if you think about how you manage a very error-prone process, which voice and communicating with voice is a good example of, there is a good framework for this, and anybody who has done software development probably is familiar with this. So the Agile framework, which is really about short cycles, incremental delivery, being iterative, failing fast, and getting feedback fast, and delivering value as early as possible. And so, like, the problem with the waterfall is that you get the value at the very end, and all of the mistakes sort of compound before you get that value at the very end, and you don't have visibility to those issues before the very end. And so really doing agile small iterations is a lot better way to mitigate those issues. And if you think about voice, the same thing applies. So if you think about modern assistant frameworks, typically the way that they work is that you have speech to text, you have natural language understanding, then you have response, and you get the response at the very end. So basically, this is a waterfall process that happens at the point when the user stops talking. And the problem is that when you have errors, and with voice communication, you always have them, all of those compound, and you get that, sorry, I didn't quite understand you at the very end. And at that point, those errors are very hard to recover from. And so a way to mitigate this is by actually trying to make sense of the user the very second they start to speak. And that's actually the way humans do it. So and this actually results into something where the communication is a lot more rapid. And so if you think about something like a smart speaker, you take turns. So the user says something, the smart speaker responds after the user has finished. And this is sort of a turn-based half duplex way of communicating. But if you add a screen and you add the real-time spoken language understanding, the screen can start to communicate back to the speaker the very moment they start to speak, and you get a lot faster two-directional feedback loop. And so yeah. Next, I would like to give some examples of these type of experiences that I just went through, and these ideas of expectation management, as well as the fast feedback loop way of delivering value fast. So just as a context, we think that there are two types of computer voice interfaces. The other context is human to computer interaction, where you're speaking to the computer to perform a task. And then the other context is human to human interaction, where the voice technology works in the background to enhance communication set up between two or more people. So yeah, let's start with the demos. This is a demo of an e-commerce experience. This is also an example of this fast feedback loop and being robust against these things that might happen in verbal communication. I'm looking for men's sneakers from Adidas, no, actually Puma. No, sorry, I mean Nike, in color white, no, actually black. And can you sort by price? I'm size 11, by the way. So there you saw something that's very typical: hesitation, self-correction, and you saw that the screen updated immediately as something meaningful was said, and that enabled this very fast feedback loop between the user and the system to recover from these mistakes and react very fast. So a second example I have is from voice inputting and data inputting, which is a very important application for especially different type of professionals on the go and in the field. So this is an example of inputting information to a CRM system using voice.
Phone +1 312 983 0743. Email edwin.collins@acme.com. Deal size 60 kilos. Probability 70%. Set stage to proposal. Notes: Edwin was very interested in our solution for the web. Had problems integrating existing solutions. Will decide by next month. John Brown was mentioned as the technical contact point. His email is john.brown@acme.com. Tasks: send Edwin the deck by next Monday. Book a meeting with John Brown by next Tuesday.
So that was a pretty good example of actually a very complex information inputting task that you can imagine would not be really possible without the screen to give the confidence to really see that the information is inputted as it's supposed to. That was my final demo. So to recap, really what I think are the sort of the most key important points for voice experiences in the near future, and really improve the quality of the voice experience is really three simple things. So I think the association to the UI to a machine rather than a sort of a person is a great way to manage expectations. You should constrain and display what you can do. And then the last is that you should be able to react very fast, to fail fast, and be able to cope with these different type of situations that typically happen with voice and language communication. So yeah, that was my presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We had 2 questions come in, and definitely people have more. Feel free to add them to the chat. The first one was, have you noticed that people tend to leave or ask for a human when you have disclosed that you're talking to an AI machine?
Yeah. I have, so I could say yes. I think the problem, something that I didn't mention in my presentation, but a point that I want to make is that at the end of the day, so that the wider adoption of voice is really about trust. And I think now probably the expectation that people have is that if I have like a task that is at all more complicated than just a very simple thing, probably the machine will not be able to handle that. And typically that is the case. And so like personally, if I think typically that's if I notice that I am being served by this type of AI, I would rather talk with a human if it's at all like more complex. And so I think the answer is really that we should improve the trust that people have to these systems. And then the way that we do this is that we need to nail the more simple cases and then advance to the more advanced cases. So my sort of guidance is that if you are having that problem, try to first nail the very simple use cases and have people trust those, and then you can go to the more advanced ones. And when people get used to that, they're actually able to complete their task with voice. They will less ask for the human.
Yeah, now I've got a recent anecdote where I asked for a human, and unfortunately, the whole interaction probably took close to 40 minutes because the human is chatting and multitasking. So if I had a human on the phone in real time, like it would have been faster. But the fact that I'm dealing with someone that takes a few minutes to respond to the simplest thing, that was a negative experience in itself with a human chatter. So the machine has its advantages.
That's a good example. Yeah, that's a good counter example. Yeah.
The other question is, so there's regulation in California, for example, that you have to disclose that you are a non-human agent, you're a bot. Are there other regulations in other places you've seen, or what's sort of happening now in the space with regard to disclosure?
Yeah, I must say that is not quite my expertise in terms of regulation. I'm more maybe familiar with these data privacy things that, especially here in Europe, are quite tight. But I must admit that question is something that I don't have like particularly deep knowledge in.
Okay, no worries. It looks like that's it for your questions. Thank you so much. And our next presenter is Mandy. So Mandy's a marketing leader and former consultant with both agency and client side experience. And her first experience with voice was as a founding member of the conversational commerce team at Domino's. Yeah, that's Domino's Pizza. And they launched some of the first third-party transactional voice and chat experiences on Amazon Alexa, Google Home, Facebook Messenger, and more. I even saw Slack. So quite interesting, all the different interfaces there. So Mandy's currently head of marketing at Speechly, the fast, accurate, and simple voice UI for web voice and e-commerce. And I'll switch it over to Mandy now.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. I think everyone should be able to see it now. All good. Let me know if not. So like Alex said, I've got a background where my voice experience itself actually really started with Domino's. So prior to joining the conversational commerce team at Domino's, I really didn't have a voice pedigree, let's say. So a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about, the stories I'm going to be sharing, are very much coming from my lived experiences. And I'll say that it is highly likely that every single one of you on the call right now have more voice experience than I had when I first got into voice. And so I'm really excited to share these stories with you because I'm hopeful that you can take some of the lessons that I learned and kind of the more innovation focused approach that we took and apply it to really help take the industry to a whole new place, because we're at a point now where the technology is really ready for some incredible user-facing innovations. All right, so to go back in time a little bit and give you a little bit more context on where we at Domino's had gotten into voice. So in 2011, Siri launches. It's that first really big commercially successful assistant experience, unless you want to count Clippy, which you probably don't. So it's the first voice one, right? And just 3 years later, Domino's ended up launching Dom, the voice ordering assistant, into the Android and iPhone apps that we had. And it was powered at the time by Nuance's Nina, if you remember that. And we were really early to market there. We actually launched before Amazon launched Alexa. And then as all of these other big players and platforms started to launch, we were launching right along with them up until we got to a place where we actually removed the original DOM implementation from the apps and replaced it with a homegrown one and added it to our website as well. So there was a lot of innovation that happened in a very short amount of time, and a lot of it was centered around these voice, chat, and multimodal experiences. And I think it's important to call out. So I started this by saying I was not a voice expert. I had no voice experience when I first started this. No one on the team did. We didn't hire subject matter experts. We were just taking what we knew about our customers and user experience and innovation and applying that to what we were doing. And when I left the company in 2018, we were a $3 billion e-commerce brand. And you don't get to that point unless you know how to innovate. And when it comes to innovation, I think it's bigger than just tech innovation. And I actually think that that's been a key component of the success within voice, because it's not just viewing it as a tech-enabled innovation. It's looking at it with a little bit of a different perspective. And so when we were talking about innovation, we knew how to do it because we knew how to ask really good questions, how to move really fast, and how to learn from our mistakes. And in innovation, we knew the importance of the story and the narrative and building something more than just a product. It was all about trying to build for that bigger picture, that bigger story. And a lot of that comes back to kind of asking the right questions. So when we were innovating, when we were building on new platforms, Alec mentioned we also built for Slack. So when we were launching on the platforms that were pushing voice assistants initially, it made super easy sense, right? You had a new channel that was optimized for voice or for chat. And so we had the ability to launch on those platforms. So we would do it. And we started to expand beyond that. Slack was a not so natural, but still natural platform for us because of the integration opportunities and the app opportunities that they offered. And so when we were looking at kind of what we could do and what we could build there, we went back to what story were we trying to tell with this innovation. And the innovations that we were doing that were tech focused were tied to this bigger story around tech innovation and kind of that shiny, new, fancy thing that is perceived as being really high quality. And that tech halo effect actually extends beyond just the technology itself to the brand more largely. So when you're talking about how the brand and the product and the food is viewed, if the brand itself is viewed as being this really high quality, tech forward, innovative company, some of that applies to people's perception of the product and the food itself too. So there was a desire to constantly be pushing on that end and help grow that story. And when you look at Slack, what it is a platform for collaboration. And it's a platform for collaboration that at that time was very much used by businesses and by people in offices. And you know, in the before times when we were all sitting in offices, when you would place an order for a team, a pizza order for a team, how did you do it? And so we were kind of going back to this question of what value could we add within Slack by adding in a conversational experience to order pizza. And it was this idea that in an office environment, when there is an order being placed, there was very often someone who would either send an email to a large group and say, hey, what do you want? Or would walk around with a pen and paper and take orders and kind of ask what people were looking for. So how do we translate that into the experience itself? Well, we take that and we make it really transparent, and you allow people to collaborate and have a conversation within the context of a larger Slack thread. And that was the first time that we built essentially a group ordering experience within the conversational context, voice or multimodal, or just pure chatbot, and it really pushed us from an innovation perspective and from a conversation design perspective, and also was a brand new story. So when we were going out and talking to the press, this was something that was new, different, and so it helped to keep that bigger innovation story alive. We knew what we wanted out of all of these experiences. We knew what innovation meant to our brand and to our company. And so we weren't afraid to do things that wouldn't have a clear 6-month ROI, right? Because very often when we talk about innovation within the context of a business, there's a big focus on, I would say, sometimes a narrow view of what success looks like. And so here, the definition of success was a little broader. And so that gave us a lot of flexibility. And so the story of why Domino's, a pizza company, would want to do tech innovation is pretty clear, I think. And if it's not, please feel free to push on that and ask that question in the chat. But it's not as clear, I think, to a lot of folks outside of the company or the industry why big tech companies would want to partner with a pizza company. And I think if you kind of peel back a little bit, you think about pizza. It is something that a lot of people are familiar with, a lot of people like. It's viewed as being really simple. It's accessible. People, they have a pizza that they do or they don't like. And there are people who order pizza as a habit. You have your Thursday night order and it's family pizza night and you're ordering that every week and it doesn't change. So it's habitual. So when you place that order, it's going to get to you within 30 minutes to an hour's time. So there's this near instant gratification. And whatever platform you're using to place that order, there's a tie there. And if you're doing it habitually, well, then there's a really strong, compelling reason for these big tech companies who are trying to get people to use their technology habitually. They're trying to build this ecosystem of apps and experiences and skills that people are coming back to and saying, oh, this is really cool. I can do this here and I can't do it anywhere else. So they wanted to build the best experiences possible for their platforms. Now, what we wanted to build was the best experience possible for our customers. And so there's a natural tension there. Sometimes the two align, but sometimes it doesn't always align. And we're also dealing with different priorities. We wanted to launch a lot of different places. We wanted to do a lot of experimentation. Each of these different partners and companies were very focused on launching their tech roadmaps. And we were just a blip on that roadmap. So we were innovating alongside these really smart people with a really strong pedigree and background and voice. And it didn't always align, right? So when we look at what those first few months looked like, if you ask me, like, what's one word that would describe what it was like launching on all of these platforms so quickly, it would probably be chaos. And I use that word knowing it has a little bit of a negative connotation, but in this instance, I actually don't think that it was really negative. It was productive chaos. It forced us to move really quickly and be in constant communication with these different teams because things were changing on a daily basis. They all wanted a pizza partner who was able to launch with them so that they could get people taking this habitual transactional experience through their platform. And so there was that desire from their side to make this work, and there was the desire from our side to make this work. And what that meant in practice was that, for instance, when we were building the experience for Google Home, we were actually building it while their lawyers were still figuring out what the rules were going to be for transactions performed on the platform. So we would get a note back, hey, the lawyers want to do this. And we were like, well, that's not what we're building right now. And so there was this constant negotiation and back and forth. When we were building for Facebook Messenger, which wasn't voice, it was a chat, although you could use the microphone right on your keyboard. There was another group within that same company that was trying to convince us that actually we shouldn't be doing that. We should just be rebuilding our mobile website within the Messenger platform and only sending people from Facebook there instead of sending them to a chat experience or to our website. So lack of alignment, right? Like this just general sense of like, what is going on, but being able to function through that and continue to work through it. When we talk about the different types of voice experiences, there's that headless voice only experience, which was what a lot of the initial launches were focused on. So you think about in Amazon Alexa, the original one, right? There was no Amazon Show at that point. There was no multimodal experience. Then all of a sudden we get these NDAs and we're told that we're going to get a device and it has to be kept in a locked room and we need to build a multimodal experience. So we did that. And that experience, this was what we had kind of hand drawn on the door to that locked conference room. And that's kind of, it was poking fun at it, but it was a lot. It was things moving super fast. And it was a lot of us trying to establish and hold firm to what we were trying to build and why we were trying to build it, while managing through and negotiating with all of these very large companies and these really smart people who are trying to build something very specific. And the way that we did that, the way that we stayed focused and centered on what we were trying to build and why we were building it, was by going back constantly to this idea of putting the user first. So I talked about asking the right questions and how that's key to innovation. The right questions in this situation, the first one we wanted to always ask was, what are we trying to solve? And once we knew that, we wanted to really understand at a high level of detail who we were trying to solve it for. And then what does that group, what do they actually want? And then once we had those things identified, then it was on us to figure out the lowest effort, lowest tech way to get the information that we needed in order to build successfully. And sometimes that was to help answer these questions, and sometimes it was after those questions had been asked, we had some more questions to go through. So I'll give a little bit of an example, going back to the original launch of this first voice assistant within the Android and iPhone apps. So we launched the first DOM in 2014, and it really gave us a leg up from an insights perspective, because we had a really strong understanding that it was tied to the efficiency of the experience. That was our big insight from the data. And the way that we got to that was that we looked at who was using the feature. We knew that we had a little bit of kind of the people who were using it were the people who were using our app. And so by default, they were going to be our best customers, because you don't download the app unless you're using it regularly. So these were not going to be your casual pizza consumers. These are probably going to be the people who had that more habitual pizza ordering experience. So they're typically placing an order every week, every other week. And when they were using the voice feature, because we could look at the data and see, what they were doing, where the conversation was taking them, how long they were engaging, we found that the people who had the shortest engagements, the least amount of turns in the conversation, the least amount of exposure to the personality, the fun of the voice assistant, they actually had the highest likelihood of not only placing an order, but coming back to place another order using the feature. So it was this aha moment of, oh, okay, pizza is a convenience food, right? You order pizza because it's easy. It's really good, but it's also really easy to get an order in and get it to you. And this just adds another layer of convenience, especially if they're reordering something. It takes them just a couple taps or just one invocation, and then they can go through and get that into the cart and placed. So there's this huge focus on how do we make this really easy for our best customers, because we are solving here for convenience. So these voice only, these back and forth conversations, they work for some use cases, but we had a really strong sense that most likely that was not necessarily going to work for everyone. And so we wanted to zoom in a little bit on who we were building for and what we were building for them. But with that said, we had access to our data, right? We also, and I myself was not a voice expert. And so we wanted to have those insights and those assumptions challenged a little bit. So we actually reached out to our internal voice experts, which, if you think about it, we've got people within the company who are taking thousands of voice orders every year, because a voice order by any other name is a phone order. So our customer service reps, our operations team, they've been taking voice orders for years. And so going back to that idea of what's the kind of lowest effort, lowest tech way that we can get really strong insights, we pulled a group of them together into a conference room. We whiteboarded, we sat down and we talked through and had them tell us, what does the ideal conversation look like at different points in the experience? And it was incredible, the insights that we got from that maybe hour-long meeting. We learned that if you ask questions to validate versus asking someone to give you information from scratch, it creates a much faster, much easier conversation, and it creates a sense of familiarity where it helps build trust. So an example would be, instead of asking someone, what address are you at? We would say, if we had the data available, are you still at the address on Grand Avenue? And then they could just say yes, and we could move forward. Or if they said no, then we could go into the more time intensive back and forth. Now, this is time intensive back and forth, even without a technology layer, right? If you're talking to an actual person who's taking the information, you add on that bot piece, and it becomes even more difficult, especially in that back and forth. And so we knew that that was kind of a key learning, is that if we can eliminate some of the back and forth on that more manual input, because we are forced to use this conversational context, that's probably going to be ideal. We also learned that coupons are vitally important when building a new order from scratch. So someone who isn't going and saying, hey, can you get me the same thing I got last time? Those orders are typically saved with a coupon associated with them. If they're building something from scratch, very often the price point that's in their head is the price point with a coupon applied. They don't always say that. They don't always proactively ask for it. So we needed to rethink our couponing process in the context of a voice experience. We also had to rethink the type of coupons that we were offering, because for a lot of our coupons, they were very category specific. And so if you removed an item, it would in practice like break the coupon. And in a voice only experience, that's really tough to get yourself out of that error state. You just go down a rabbit hole, and it's really, really hard. So we knew that that was going to be a really tough thing to solve for, and probably not something we could solve for really quickly. We also learned from the folks in the stores that there were a lot of instances where people would call the store and they actually couldn't place an order because the store was so busy that no one could answer the phone. And so when they were having these conversations with us, they're like, do you think that this technology, this voice technology can help with that? And we knew that it probably could, but building an integration into an IVR essentially is what that would have been. That takes a lot of time. It's really expensive. And for a really big brand like Domino's, yes, sure, they could have greenlit and said, yeah, go, let's test this. But we also knew that when we're talking about who we're building for, if you're building something for someone who is calling the store, they are doing that intentionally. They are bypassing other available digital ordering platforms. So they're likely not very tech savvy. So the question that was asked earlier of, do you see a drop off when people realize they're talking to a bot? That was the question we were trying to solve for. We didn't know if these people, if this audience would be open to placing an order with the bot. We had a sense that if their option was, I can place my order by talking to a bot, or I can not place my order because no one can talk to me, that they might be more open to it. But we wanted to test that assumption before we started building. So when you think about the idea of like, how do you prototype a digital experience? I'm not sure how many folks are familiar with the idea of paper prototyping, but before you go into like tech tools and systems and like actually sketch things out and make these high fidelity mock-ups, very often you'll just sit with a pen and paper and just kind of draw and sketch out things, and then sit, get feedback, make changes really quickly. It's a really low effort, low tech way to get feedback fast. So we took that idea and we applied it to this new voice context. And the way that it was done is that in this initial test, we had someone sitting in a room, they had a script. In the script, they said that they were a bot and that the store was busy and they could help place the order until someone could get to them, or they could go back on hold. And when they were reading the script, they were talking in a way that was very robotic, so that it was very clear. I mean, it was exaggerated intentionally to make it incredibly clear that this was not a conversation with a person. And then we looked at the data when we routed just a percentage of calls to this person who was playing the bot. And we saw if people went through with the order. We looked at conversion rate. We looked at the typical rates of dropped calls and orders taken compared to a normal day where this wasn't happening. And the data said enough people are willing to go through this experience to where it makes sense for us to actually now go and build this. So just a very good, I think, reminder that technology innovation doesn't necessarily have to happen in a way that's expensive or really time intensive. So we've got all of these insights about our customers based on their behavior and feedback from our ops team, and we feel really good about it. We've got a clear understanding of what we want to build, who we want to build it for, and we bring that back to our partners, and their confidence in our insights was about zero. I mean, it was across the board because we're coming in and we admittedly, we don't have any voice subject matter experts from a technology perspective. And there was the sense that a lot of our insights were not necessarily going to translate or they wouldn't scale across these platforms. And I think it's important to remember when you're talking about where people are coming to the table as a part of a partnership, whether it's an internal cross-functional team or external with partners, what is their context? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish? There was no one who was right or wrong in the situation. It was just different perspectives and different focuses. So our partners are focused on building these incredible platforms that were going to get people really excited using them and help them sell devices. We were focused on making sure that our really good customers had really good experiences and that we were able to build trust and not have them mess up in order that would negatively impact our store operations. Because at the end of the day, like this is something where if someone doesn't get what they wanted, someone has to go and remake that and get that back for them. So there's a really, there's a human, there's a product cost to that. So we got pushback, not because our thoughts were bad, but because there was a misalignment in what we wanted. And so we got to a place through conversation where it was clear that our goal was still, we wanted to be able to do full from scratch, brand new menu ordering with coupons. But in order to hit those product roadmap and timelines, the innovation had to focus first on getting things launched, and then we could improve on that. So we launched with these more limited, you could place a reorder, an easy order, which is your saved favorite order, and you could track. So a lot of utility there. And the way that we did that was with a really small team. We, I think, had 10 people at most as things were growing. We had a horizontal technology that we could scale across all of these different platforms. So we weren't doing different models for, one for Google, one for Amazon, one for Slack. And we invested it in building it the right way. And the people who were working on the project were all exclusively working on the project. So we had time to focus and we weren't being held to these, hey, what's the ROI? What's the ROI in 6 months? It was this bigger, grander vision around innovation. And we had really good snacks. And so just looking at time, I'm going to go a little quickly through some of this. I want to make sure that we have time for questions. So it's 2018. Why did I leave Domino's? Why did I leave voice at this point? It got to a point where it kind of felt almost like we were, and this is oversimplifying, just taking something and kind of printing off another copy of it because the technology was not really moving forward at that point. It was a lot of iteration instead of innovation. And I was looking for more of these like full-fledged, how can we use voice in new ways? And we just weren't at that point. And so ended up leaving, went into consulting, focused on digital innovation, where I ended up working a lot on chatbots and voice assistant type experiences. And then, as Hannah's mentioned, in the last few years, we've had a ton of innovation back again within the technology side. And the best way that I can describe it is that we've gone from printing off sheets of paper, these two-dimensional things, to now you can print in 3D. And so super excited that that's where we are as an industry. And now with this technology plus innovation, as long as we're focused on thinking user first, walking through what we're trying to solve, who we're solving it for, and what they actually want, we're in a position to do a lot of incredible things across industries. And so really excited to have a chance to talk through all of that with you, and happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
All right, thank you, Mandy. I really appreciated kind of hearing all the candid thoughts on how it went, and really the goals of the platforms that are trying to kind of get them in people's homes versus Domino's goals, where you want to get people a pizza in a smooth manner, and that it's sometimes you have the same core goals, but nonetheless the details on how you approach those can definitely differ.